If you're a Big Ten fan, you notice a couple things are wrong with the Penn State program. Namely, they have an issue with Ohio State and with Michigan. They can't beat them. The Nittany Lions have lost 7 in a row to the Buckeyes of Ohio State and 7 of the last 10 to the Wolverines. Today, I'm going to take a little bit of a deep dive into the statistics of why Penn State is losing to these big-time Big Ten programs, and also a little bit into the psyche of James Franklin, and maybe he's perhaps the cause of the issue and why they can't get over the hump in these big games. Looking at the statistics, I was a bit surprised. I expected to see a massive drop-off for the Nittany Lions versus both Ohio State and versus Michigan. I didn't quite find that. I found it versus Michigan. Versus Michigan, only 15 points in 2023, 17 in 2022, 17 in 2021, and only 10 points in a debacle in Ann Arbor in 2016, the year that Penn State won the Big Ten Conference and went to the Rose Bowl, a heartbreaking loss to the Trojans out there for the Nittany Lion faithful. But I didn't find the same for the versus true against the Buckeyes. Yeah, they only scored 12 points this past fall, but in previous years they scored 31 and 24 points. So yes, it's a drop-off from the norm. We see Penn State averaging right around 35 to 38 points per game. And I went all the way back to 2016 to look this up. And that's about their statistical averages. So yes, it is a drop-off in those games, but we would expect that based on talent. Maybe not quite the drop-off versus Michigan that we've seen, though. So you expect, as I mentioned, points to drop off a little bit versus elite talent. You're facing better talent. You're going to score less, most likely. You're not playing Kent State where you're going to drop a 63 bomb on them and just go about your business and have your second stringers in by halftime. This is not how it's going to go versus Ohio State Michigans of the world. But I expected a little bit more of a drop-off. So it's not necessarily that they're scoring less points per game, although they are. That's not necessarily why they're losing the games. And I admit, I honestly expected to see a massive drop-off after the Trace McSorley and Barkley years. Offensive points per game, yards per game. And in my research, I did not find that. I found that they're still putting up about their season averages. In 2016, they averaged 37.1 points per game, 432 yards per game per contest. In 2023, 36.2 points per game and 471 yards per contest. So it's not necessarily that their offense is playing worse throughout the season. They're hitting their statistical averages. And yes, I do understand that these stats are padded a little bit by the inferior opponents that Penn State typically plays in the non-conference. They're not known for going out and scheduling some huge, massive, bloodbath of a contest in the non-conference. So they usually put up great stats in these non-conference opponent games and pad their stats a little bit for the season. But let's look into why they are struggling. The defense has always been elite at Penn State. It's always been a top 3 in the conference squad, unit. It's always elite. Penn State always has superior linebackers, superior defensive line players, and it shows in statistics-wise. Penn State is always in the top 3 in the conference and usually top 15, top 20 in the nation. Now, a little bit of that has to do with the Big Ten offenses not being so great. But some of it has to do with Penn State is elite on defense. So what's going on in these big games versus the Buckeyes and versus the Wolverines? Why can Penn State not get over the hump? Why do they have a 7-game losing streak to Ohio State? Why have they lost 7 of the last 10 to Michigan? Well, let's find out. Now, admittedly, a little bit of this is going to be a little bit feelings ball. It just is, But statistic-wise, Penn State does not rush the ball as well versus Michigan and versus Ohio State. Now, some might say, well, duh, it's Ohio State, Michigan, the two best defenses in the Big Ten year in and year out most years. Penn State interchanges with them from time to time as well, obviously. Of course, they're not going to run the ball as well. But that's the key. Ohio State still runs the ball well versus these big-time opponents in these big matchups. They're able to establish the point of scrimmage and the line of scrimmage and able to play a little bit of bully ball. Now, maybe not the past couple years because their offensive style has changed a little bit, but that's been the key throughout the decades for Ohio State and Michigan winning the game in the trenches. So it's a little bit not being able to run the football as well, but it's also a little bit James Franklin. I think he's the main culprit in this thing. I noticed in games versus inferior opponents, he's running trick plays. He's running, creative plays and creative play calls in those contests. And I don't see those in these big games. He clenches up a little bit. He gets tight. He makes some nervous decisions. He makes some very curious late game decisions too. And it's just one of the reasons why I think Franklin is just not cut out for the big time. Now, he's good enough to get Penn State to 11-2. Obviously, they've had plenty of 11-win seasons over the last couple of seasons. So he is an elite coach. He's a top 15 coach in college football. There's no question. He's probably a top 10 coach in college football. Correct me if I'm wrong. Say so down in the comments if you think otherwise. Maybe you think he's top 5. I just don't. He hasn't won a conference title since 2016. Yeah, I know Urban Meyer's in the conference and Ryan Day was in the conference and Jim Harbaugh was in the conference, but Harbaugh didn't win a conference title until 2021. So that's why I say it's a little bit of a feelings ball thing, is because I see him clenching up in these big moments, making some fourth down decisions that aren't exactly, the best decision for his team and in the moment and in that situation. And I just think Franklin, he doesn't have the clutch gene in him. I'll just say that. Statistically wise, they don't run the football as well, and that plays into the factor into the game for sure. But I believe that it's Franklin overall not being made and cut out for these big moments. So leave your thoughts below. Comment what you think. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. What do you think? Why can Penn State not get over the hump? Why can that not beat Ohio State or Michigan in recent years? Let me know your thoughts below. I'd love to hear from you.